You're watching the evening news when a breaking alert flashes across your screen that changes everything investigators thought they knew about the D4vd case. He had help all along. The revelation came during a routine analysis of security footage from the night Sarah Martinez disappeared. Digital forensics experts, working around the clock to piece together David's movements, discovered something that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. A second figure appeared in multiple surveillance videos, always staying just out of clear camera range, but consistently present during critical moments. Special Agent Lisa Chen held an emergency press conference at 4 p.m., her expression grim as she faced a room packed with reporters and concerned citizens. "We now have evidence that David Chen was not operating alone," she announced, her words sending shockwaves through the packed auditorium. "We have identified a second individual who appears to have been actively involved in these crimes from the beginning." The accomplice was identified as Marcus Rivera, a 28-year-old former military communications specialist who had been discharged under questionable circumstances 2 years earlier. Rivera's background painted a disturbing picture. He possessed technical skills that perfectly complemented David's methodical planning. While David handled the direct contact with victims, Rivera managed surveillance, counter-surveillance, and what investigators now realized was an elaborate communication system designed to keep them one step ahead of law enforcement. Security footage analysis revealed Rivera's presence at the coffee shop where all 3 victims had been regulars. But unlike David, who appeared as a customer, Rivera had positioned himself as part of the cleaning crew that worked late-night shifts. This gave him access to the building's security system, employee schedules, and most importantly, the ability to observe potential victims without raising suspicion. The partnership explained how David had managed to evade capture for so long. Rivera had been monitoring police communications from the beginning, using military-grade equipment to intercept radio transmissions and digital communications between investigating agencies. Phone records showed the two had been in constant contact, using encrypted messaging apps and coded language that investigators were still working to decipher. Most chilling of all, evidence suggested Rivera might still be active. While David had fled after the 3rd body was discovered, Rivera appeared to have remained in the area, possibly continuing to gather intelligence on the investigation or preparing for future operations. Now people are left wondering, when predators work in teams, how many others might be involved that we don't even know about? The discovery of Marcus Rivera's involvement sent shockwaves through the law enforcement community and forced a complete reassessment of the case. What had initially appeared to be the work of a lone predator was now revealed to be something far more sophisticated and dangerous, a coordinated partnership between 2 individuals with complementary skills. FBI behavioral analysts worked through the night to understand the dynamic between David and Rivera. Dr. Sarah Kim, brought in to consult on the psychological aspects of the partnership, explained the terrifying implications during a classified briefing with the Joint Task Force. "When you have 2 offenders working together, the risk of escalation increases exponentially," she warned. "They feed off each other's confidence and cover each other's weaknesses." The timeline investigators had constructed needed complete revision. Phone records revealed that David and Rivera had been communicating for over 18 months before the first murder. Their digital conversations, recovered from encrypted servers, showed a gradual progression from theoretical discussions about crime to detailed planning of actual operations. The messages revealed Rivera as the technical mastermind, while David handled what they called field operations. Rivera's military background proved crucial to understanding their success at evading capture. His service record, obtained through federal channels, showed specialized training in communications interception, surveillance detection, and evasion techniques. He had been discharged following an investigation into unauthorized access to classified intelligence systems, a red flag that investigators now realized should have kept him under closer scrutiny. The partnership had been methodically planned from the beginning. Rivera had deliberately sought employment with the cleaning company that serviced the coffee shop, while David had positioned himself as a regular customer. Together, they created a comprehensive surveillance network that allowed them to study potential victims' routines, identify vulnerabilities, and time their attacks with precision. But what disturbed investigators most was evidence suggesting this partnership was part of a larger network. Encrypted communications referenced other individuals by code names, and financial records showed payments to multiple unknown parties for various services. The realization that David and Rivera might be part of an organized group of predators added urgency to an already critical manhunt. Local authorities found themselves facing a reality they weren't prepared for: multiple dangerous individuals working together, with one still at large and potentially active. How do you protect a community when you don't know how many threats are still out there? The revelation that Rivera had remained in the area while David fled raised immediate questions about public safety and law enforcement's ability to protect potential victims. Unlike David, who had panicked and run after the 3rd body was discovered, Rivera appeared to be following a different strategy, hiding in plain sight while continuing to gather intelligence. Surveillance footage from the days following David's escape showed Rivera moving through the community with calculated precision. He was captured on cameras at 3 different gas stations, 2 grocery stores, and outside the police station where the Joint Task Force had established their command center. Each appearance seemed designed to assess law enforcement's response and capabilities rather than to plan additional attacks. Detective Maria Rodriguez, reviewing the footage with federal agents, noticed Rivera's sophisticated understanding of surveillance techniques. He knows exactly where the cameras are and how to use them to his advantage, she observed during a strategy meeting. When he wants to be seen, he makes sure he's visible. When he doesn't, he disappears completely. The community's reaction to learning about Rivera's continued presence was immediate and intense. Parents began keeping children indoors after school hours. Local businesses hired additional security guards. The college campus implemented a complete lockdown of dormitory buildings after 8 p.m., and emergency alert systems were activated to notify residents of any potential sightings. Rivera's military background made him particularly dangerous as a fugitive. Unlike typical criminals who might make impulsive decisions under pressure, his training had taught him patience and strategic thinking. Psychological profiles suggested he was likely monitoring news coverage, police communications, and community reactions to adjust his behavior accordingly. Phone records revealed Rivera had maintained contact with David during the first 48 hours after the escape, but communications had ceased abruptly. Investigators theorized this might indicate either a falling out between the partners or a planned separation designed to confuse law enforcement efforts. The silence was more ominous than constant communication would have been. Local gun stores reported a surge in firearms purchases and self-defense class enrollments. Community watch groups formed spontaneously, with neighbors organizing patrol schedules and communication networks. But law enforcement warned that civilian vigilante efforts could be dangerous when dealing with someone with Rivera's training and experience. The psychological impact of knowing a trained predator was potentially watching and planning created a unique form of community trauma. When someone with military training decides to use those skills for evil, how do ordinary citizens protect themselves? As the investigation into Rivera's background deepened, disturbing patterns emerged that suggested the partnership with David might have been part of a long-term strategy rather than a chance encounter. Military records, obtained through federal channels, revealed Rivera's troubled history within the armed forces and raised questions about how someone with his psychological profile had been allowed to serve. Rivera's commanding officers had filed multiple reports expressing concerns about his behavior during his final year of service. According to classified documents obtained by federal investigators, Rivera had shown an unusual interest in intelligence gathering operations that fell outside his assigned duties. He had been caught accessing personnel files of female soldiers and had received formal reprimands for inappropriate surveillance of base facilities. The investigation into his discharge revealed even more troubling details. Rivera had been suspected of using military equipment to monitor civilian communications in the area surrounding the base. While investigators could never prove criminal intent, the pattern of unauthorized surveillance was serious enough to warrant immediate discharge and loss of security clearance. Dr. James Watson, the former FBI profiler consulting on the case, found Rivera's psychological profile deeply concerning. Military training combined with predatory instincts creates an extremely dangerous individual, he explained to the task force. Rivera had access to advanced surveillance techniques, counterintelligence training, and weapons expertise. When someone with that skill set decides to target civilians, the threat level is exponentially higher. Financial records painted a picture of someone who had been preparing for criminal activity long before partnering with David. Rivera had systematically purchased equipment through multiple vendors to avoid detection: night vision devices, encrypted communication systems, and surveillance technology that rivaled what law enforcement agencies used. He had paid for everything in cash or through untraceable cryptocurrency transactions. But perhaps most disturbing was evidence that Rivera had been recruiting others. Encrypted messages recovered from his devices referenced at least 3 other individuals who appeared to be receiving training or guidance in surveillance techniques. The communications used military-style operational language and suggested a hierarchical structure with Rivera in a leadership role. Investigators realized they weren't just hunting 2 dangerous individuals. They were potentially dealing with a cell of trained predators operating under military-style organization. The implications for public safety were staggering, and the manhunt expanded to include surveillance of known associates and military veterans with similar discharge circumstances. When someone uses military training to organize civilian predators, what does that mean for community safety and law enforcement's ability to respond? The expansion of the investigation revealed a network far more extensive and organized than anyone had imagined. As federal agents traced Rivera's connections and communications, they uncovered what appeared to be a sophisticated recruitment and training operation targeting individuals with specific psychological profiles and technical skills. Encrypted servers, discovered through Rivera's digital trail, contained detailed files on potential recruits across multiple states. The profiles read like a predator's handbook. Individuals with technical skills, military or law enforcement backgrounds, and histories of concerning behavior toward women. Each file included psychological assessments, capability evaluations, and what investigators could only describe as operational potential ratings. The recruitment process was methodical and patient. Rivera had been cultivating relationships through online forums dedicated to military veterans, using coded language to identify individuals who shared his twisted worldview. Communications showed him gradually introducing increasingly extreme concepts, testing each recruit's willingness to participate in surveillance activities that started as seemingly innocent intelligence gathering. Agent Chen's team discovered that Rivera had been operating training sessions disguised as security consulting workshops. These sessions, held in remote locations across 3 states, taught participants advanced surveillance techniques, counter-surveillance methods, and communication security procedures. What participants believed was legitimate security training was actually preparation for criminal activity. The scope of the network became clear when investigators identified at least 12 individuals who had attended Rivera's training sessions over the past 2 years. Background checks on these participants revealed disturbing patterns. Several had been investigated for stalking, others had restraining orders filed against them, and 3 had previous arrests for voyeurism or harassment charges. Local authorities in multiple jurisdictions found themselves coordinating simultaneous investigations as the network's reach became apparent. Search warrants were executed across 6 states targeting the homes and workplaces of known associates. What they found confirmed investigators' worst fears: evidence of ongoing surveillance operations targeting women in multiple communities. The realization that Rivera had been building an organized network of predators for years sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies nationwide. This wasn't just about David and Rivera anymore. It was about dismantling an entire organization dedicated to targeting and victimizing women through sophisticated surveillance and coordination. Community leaders struggled to process the implications. How many other networks like this might exist? How many communities might be under surveillance without knowing it? The case had evolved from a local manhunt into a national security concern that challenged everything law enforcement thought they knew about how predators operate in the modern era. When someone with military training decides to organize and train civilian predators, how do you protect entire communities from a threat they can't see coming? As federal agents worked to dismantle Rivera's network, the psychological impact on affected communities became a secondary crisis requiring immediate attention. The realization that organized groups had been conducting surveillance on unsuspecting citizens created a new form of collective trauma that mental health professionals had rarely encountered. Dr. Michael Torres, brought in to coordinate community mental health response, described the situation as unprecedented. When people learn they've been watched, studied, and potentially targeted by an organized group, it creates a profound sense of violation that goes beyond typical crime victim trauma, he explained during emergency community meetings. Everyone starts questioning what they thought was private, safe, or secure. The evidence recovered from network participants painted a disturbing picture of how extensive the surveillance had been. Personal information on hundreds of women had been collected, including daily routines, work schedules, relationship status, and what investigators could only describe as vulnerability assessments. The systematic nature of the data collection suggested each woman had been studied for weeks or months. Local businesses found themselves grappling with the realization that their establishments had been used as surveillance bases. The coffee shop where victims had been regular customers was just one of multiple locations where network members had positioned themselves as employees or frequent customers to gather intelligence on potential targets. Restaurant managers, retail supervisors, and service industry employers began reviewing their hiring practices and employee behavior with new scrutiny. Educational institutions faced their own challenges, as investigators revealed that several network members had targeted college campuses. University security departments implemented comprehensive reviews of their surveillance systems, access controls, and employee background check procedures. Students demanded transparency about what personal information might have been compromised and what steps were being taken to ensure their safety. The legal implications were equally complex. Attorneys representing potential victims filed class action lawsuits against employers who had failed to conduct adequate background checks on individuals later identified as network participants. Privacy advocates raised concerns about the balance between public safety and surveillance overreach as law enforcement expanded their monitoring capabilities in response to the threat. Social media platforms became battlegrounds as communities struggled to balance information sharing with the risk of creating additional panic. Facebook groups dedicated to sharing safety information grew to tens of thousands of members, but also became sources of misinformation and conspiracy theories that sometimes made the situation worse rather than better. The economic impact rippled through affected communities as people changed their behavior patterns. Restaurants, entertainment venues, and retail establishments saw significant decreases in foot traffic as people became reluctant to maintain predictable routines. The psychological terrorism achieved by Rivera's network had succeeded even after its discovery. When an organized group systematically violates an entire community's sense of safety and privacy, how does that community ever fully recover? 6 weeks after Rivera's network was first discovered, the full scope of the organization continued to expand as investigators uncovered connections spanning multiple years and dozens of participants across the country. What had begun as a manhunt for 2 individuals had evolved into one of the largest domestic surveillance and predator network investigations in FBI history. The breakthrough came when digital forensics experts cracked the encryption on Rivera's master communications server. What they found was a detailed operational manual that Rivera had been developing for over 3 years. The document, titled Urban Intelligence Operations, read like a military field manual adapted for civilian predators. It included recruitment strategies, target selection criteria, surveillance methodologies, and coordination protocols that revealed the true sophistication of Rivera's vision. Most disturbing was evidence that Rivera's network was not unique. Communications recovered from the server indicated contact with similar groups operating in at least 4 other regions of the country. These groups appeared to be sharing intelligence, techniques, and even coordinating activities across state lines. The FBI's Domestic Terrorism Unit took over coordination of what had become a national investigation. Agent Chen's team discovered that Rivera had been documenting every aspect of the network's operations, apparently believing he was creating a legacy that others would continue. Video recordings found in hidden storage units showed training sessions where Rivera taught participants not just surveillance techniques, but psychological manipulation methods designed to identify and exploit vulnerable individuals. The legal proceedings promised to be complex and lengthy. Federal prosecutors were preparing cases against over 20 individuals in multiple jurisdictions, ranging from conspiracy charges to violations of federal stalking and surveillance laws. Some participants claimed they believed they were involved in legitimate security consulting, while others clearly understood the criminal nature of their activities. Victim impact statements revealed the lasting trauma experienced by women who discovered they had been under surveillance. Many described feeling violated in ways that traditional crime victims rarely experience, knowing that their daily lives had been studied, analyzed, and potentially shared with unknown individuals created a form of psychological damage that therapists were still learning to address. The case forced law enforcement agencies nationwide to reevaluate their understanding of how modern predators operate. The combination of military training, digital technology, and organized coordination represented a new category of threat that existing protocols weren't designed to handle. Training programs for investigators were being redesigned to address the reality of networked predators operating with military-level sophistication. As the investigation continued, Rivera remained at large, his location unknown despite a nationwide manhunt. The network he had built continued to operate in some capacity, with participants maintaining encrypted communications and apparently attempting to continue surveillance operations even after their activities had been exposed. The case had fundamentally changed how communities, law enforcement, and individuals thought about personal safety in an era of advanced surveillance technology and organized predator networks. When someone with specialized training decides to weaponize that knowledge against innocent people, how do we adapt our understanding of safety and security to meet this new reality?